To build on your response, you did mention that women of the world have many challenges ahead of them. And clearly, I think you've managed one of those challenges wonderfully, which is to maintain the balance between tradition and modernity. And do you have a small message for women in other parts of the world, Asia and the Middle East, as to how they could cope with this challenge, especially the women of India who will be faced with it as we become a growing global economic power?
Well, I think the thing to remember is, first of all, to really know one's culture and traditions well, and to be deeply rooted in those traditions. Because I think when you know who you are, then you have the confidence to open up to the rest of the world. I find that people who shut the rest of the world off are precisely the people who are not very confident in who they are. And that's why they're threatened by anything different. And their response to that is just to close it off. When closing the world off and protectionism, whether it's in the economy or it's on a personal level, is never the long-term solution. And also to remember that our traditions and our culture are not static. They evolve with time, and they should evolve to serve the demands of our times. So it's really how to take our culture and make it flexible enough to deal with the demands of our modern world. And I think it's, at the end of the day, it's a challenge that every single country in the world is facing. As globalization is becoming more and more integrated in the rest of the world, people are having to face this challenge. So India is not alone. Every country in the world is not alone, but it doesn't have to be one at the expense of the other. In fact, as globalization is accelerating, people are holding on more to their identity. So it's really trying to find a balance between one's national identity and the global identity that exists.
I was present at a gathering where you very bravely and graciously encouraged American Jews and American Palestinians to advance a dialogue, hopefully to advance more peaceful policies in the Middle East. I want to thank you for the work you're doing, very bravely being a moderate voice from the Muslim side of the Middle East conflict. And as an American Jew, I want to ask a very pointed political question, which is, what can we do to help you?
I'm glad that you realize that the problem does need help, and it really does. I think we've all been very, very frustrated over the past years at the lack of movement in this issue. And I do believe that the Palestinian-Israeli conflict is the root problem and the main issue that we face in our part of the world. And I think that its effects have had repercussions on other problems. So whether it's on the unrest in Iraq or the rise of extremism and all other groups, violent groups, I think the main cause is this issue. There has been no dialogue between the two, no negotiations, no substantial negotiations between the two parties. And I do believe that the world needs to exert international pressure to get both sides sitting on the negotiating table. And really, we cannot keep managing the problem. We have to really deal with it and find a long and peaceful settlement to the problem.
Shukriya, Sahibat Al-Jalala. I'm not quite sure how you feel being congratulated for being a moderate Arab or a modern woman. I don't know how many of the women in this place would feel to be singled out like that, because I'm not sure whether that whole question is not more about how the men are. But having said that, it's part of how a question, I listened to your words very carefully and I'm very impressed. I'd like to say that all of us, and many and most of us here in this room, seem to be lurching towards a kind of dominant paradigm of culture and values which exists today. We seem to be all lurching towards that without really analyzing what parts of it we want to hold for ourselves going forward and what parts of it we want to reject. There's not enough thinking on that, which leads to all the kind of violence and conflict that is going on in the world, not just between people, but about resources as well. Do you think that nations such as Jordan and India, who are willing to, bridge the past and the future in a different manner, can come together to form an alternative magnet, an alternative to current sort of world councils that are leading the way the world should be? And do you think that new magnets should be made of women?
Well, I think women have an extremely important role to play, and their voices obviously need to be heard more, and I think they can bring a lot of sense to a lot of the problems that we face. And yes, I mean, I think people-to-people interaction is very, very important, and countries like India, for me, India shows that modernization and globalization does not necessarily have to have a Western face. It does not necessarily mean Westernization. So you have a democracy, but it's your own brand of democracy. It's an Indian democracy. In Jordan, we are working towards a Jordanian democracy. And I think each country takes pride in its own national identity and its own culture and traditions. And I think India very clearly encapsulates that. Do we need more world bodies to manage the problems today? Yes. Yeah, I think we need more informal alliances, and I think in the future, the private sector and the civil society are going to play a more dominant role in dealing with many of the issues that we're facing today. Even through my own work, whether it's on, I serve on the Vaccine Fund, which is a very important organization trying to immunize as many children as possible in the world. Most of the support that we have been getting, we have some national government support, but a lot of the support that we've been getting has been from non-governmental organizations and private individuals. And we have to utilize the tools and the resources that are available for us today to build networks between people and between NGOs to help out. And even when we look at national disasters, something like the tsunami or earthquakes, etc., today, any individual in any part of the world can have an effect because the tools are available through the internet, through the international communication tools. Through technology, we're able to make a difference. And if each one of us knows that he can make a difference and he has the tools at hand to affect that change, then I think we'll find solutions to many of the problems we face today.
I think you really represent a different face from the Arab world. And watching the otherwise highly surcharged geography that you come from, one starts wondering how we can move forward in terms of a strong relationship between the two countries. And the last I remember was when King Hassan and Rajiv Gandhi developed a wonderful chemistry and relationship which brought Jordan truly up in the eyes of India. And I think your visit is doing that once again. So thank you for coming to India. My question to you is, there is not enough trade between our two countries, and more importantly between India and the entire geography that you represent. And secondly, what role can Jordan play in an otherwise very surcharged area that you come from? If one looks at Iraq, that's still work in progress despite a serious intervention of the US. I think Iraq is struggling to make sense of their governance. And of late, Iran has now moved on to doing something dramatically different from what the world wants them to do. And their reference to now the UNSC clearly represents one more serious risk to the entire region. Mm-hmm. How can Jordan, with being so much in peace and stability in itself, can play a dominant role in the Arab world? Mm-hmm.
Well, in answer to the first part of your question, yes, I don't think we're doing enough to promote enough trade between whether it's Jordan and India or India and other parts of the Arab world. There's so much opportunity at the moment, especially with the economic boom that the Arab world is witnessing. So many infrastructure projects where Indian design and construction companies can come in and make use of these these opportunities. I know that, with our ambassador, we've had some Jordanian businessmen come and visit India. I'd like to see many more from India coming to visit our country. And as I said earlier, it's through those exchanges that those relationships are built. And for me, it's not just about the economic relationships. I think when you have these kinds of relationships, it builds a knowledge and an understanding, and we do need these human bridges of understanding. What can Jordan do? We live in a really, really tough neighborhood, and it has been a challenge. When we look around us, whether it's the instability in Iraq, we have Syria on our border, we have Palestine, so it's quite a challenge. As I said earlier, I think Jordan likes to think of itself as a diplomat in the region, and we try to pursue dialogue and to try to bring as much goodwill to the table as we can. But I think what the most that Jordan can do is to really provide an example to the rest of the region. An example of a country that is trying to pursue reforms, whether it's economic, social, or political reform, at the right pace, allowing these reforms to be sustainable, to be deep-rooted, to be owned by the people, to build the right institutions that will eventually lead to a full-fledged democracy. We're not a democracy at the moment, but we aim to be, and we realize that it is a process, an evolutionary one, that will take its time. It has to take its time so that it can be strong, and as I said earlier, it can be strong and sustainable. And only by doing that, by showing that you can have a democracy, you can have moderation, you can have progress with a Jordanian identity, only by providing that example can we really try to change what's going on in our region. I think success breeds success. We need to succeed so that other people and other countries can also succeed.
In this wonderful discourse that we heard that you gave, did Edward Said, who I think is probably the most important Palestinian thinker, or I should say not even Palestinian, one of the probably the most, 20 of the most important thinkers of the 20th century, did he play a role in your intellectual makeup? Thank you.
Did you get to hear it? Oh.
Did he play a role in the intellectual makeup?
In your intellectual development, in your intellectual thought processes.
This is Edward Said you're speaking about?
I'm speaking about
Yes.
Edward Said and culture
Yes.
and imperialism.
I think Edward Said is a very highly respected person, and he was held in very high regard by many in our part of the world, and I think internationally. Many of his publications have brought a paradigm difference in the way we think, and have had strong cultural impact. So yes, I certainly hold him in very high regard, as do many in our region.
Your Majesty, I'm Naveen Jindal. I'm a member of the Indian Parliament. I'd like to welcome you to India. And it was a very, very inspiring speech that you made. I'd like to ask you, how is it to be the Queen of Jordan, winning hearts all over the world, wherever you go? And does it help Jordan politically? Thank you.
I would hope so, because after all, at the end of the day, I do what I do for my country, and I think that's what drives me. It's at the end of the day, it's not about me. I'm just in a position now where I have a responsibility to serve Jordan, to serve the people of my country, and to do whatever little good I can. I realize it's really not about me, and I don't really see it maybe the way I don't see myself the way other outsiders see me. I just see myself as just trying to make a little bit of a positive change where I can.
Abhinandan.